Hello everyone, Leafreed here, and today I am looking at Waiting for Godot by Samuel Beckett. This is a French, I believe, existentialist play, post-war period, and I remember I had to read this years ago in high school, and I decided just to reread it now just because I never really understood it in the past, and rereading it now I begin to, at least to some degree, comprehend what it's getting at and what it's aiming for. I think giving this play or book or whatever to high schoolers is very misdirected because it requires a degree of life experience and a perception of civilizational change, which at least takes 20 years. You know, I remember when I turned 20, that was the time when I realized, oh, you know, things are different now. Things used to be better and worse in the past, and now they've moved somewhere else. And so until you can perceive that there is a perception of time and then the time in which you live, and then those are actually two separate things. Once you've lived, 20 years is every generation, and once you've lived through one generation, you begin to realize, oh, there are new things and new ideas and new concepts that are emerging that are, not as good, or derivatives or transformations of the things I experienced. And then you realize as you get older that the things you experienced were derivations from other things. And you're like, oh, okay, interesting. And so really this whole play is a encapsulation and a commentary on post-war Europe, post-war France, I would say specifically World War One, and I think it's just trying to explain the vibe. Excuse me for the lack of language, but it's explaining the milieu which the modern world finds itself in. So there are themes of existentialism, nihilism, Dadaism. Really, I would say this is a Dadaist production in that it's a reversal of value, a reversal of norms, a reversal of ethics and normalcy and what a play should be. And in that sense, it's a total, turning of the upside down, of the worst being the best and the best being the worst, and total ridiculousness, essentially. And that does make it funny in some parts, but on the whole, unless you have an intellectual pursuit, I would say initially just do not engage with this play whatsoever. I mean, you can watch it on YouTube if you're somewhat curious, but there is nothing really entertaining about this play. It definitely falls into the category of not entertaining, but strictly art. And even that word art, in the past 100 years has become disassociated from entertainment. Wealthy people like dukes and duchesses would put on operas and plays and have music conducted, in their stead, as entertainment. And the pieces that kind of resounded and were passed on through the generations became classics because they were so good. Nothing becomes a classic just because someone says so. Sometimes that is the case, but usually there's something that resonates with someone that tells them something about the human condition that extends through it. And so this is more on the side of strictly commentary, strictly art. And because of that, I feel you can only really appreciate that, or this play, as a contemporary piece. And I can at least understand, now from my learning of history, why this would feel like this in this way. So yeah, we can get into it. And so the book, or the play itself rather, it's only about 100 pages, and there are two characters, Vladimir and Estragon, and they are two guys. One of them alleges he was once a poet, and they're sitting in this field by this tree, and they are waiting for Godot. Actually, they don't say that initially. They have quite a bit of dialogue before they establish that. But for the most part, it's kind of a series of random phrases, noises. I mean, I know this is an upside down and inversion of the play structure, but it still has two acts. The characters still talk to each other. They don't always respond to what they're saying. A lot of times it feels like the communication is muddled, like Estragon doesn't hear Vladimir perfectly, or he brings up a completely different topic, and so the whole flow of logic and conversation is completely disrupted, and it's completely abject, and that very much is, the tone and the theme of this book. And it's really trying to emphasize how in the post-war period, it's kind of the obvious part, but waiting for Godot is waiting for God. And so it's kind of the struggle for the loss of spirituality or the loss of religion in a post-war period where it feels like nothing really matters. And so, the two characters spend the entire play bickering with each other, meeting a couple other characters, and insisting that they have to do something, but they can't do something because they're waiting for Godot. They're waiting for God. They're waiting for spirituality. They're waiting to be saved, essentially. And so there are a few scenes in here where even before they discuss they're waiting for Godot, they bring up the fact that, what is it? Not auto asphyxiation, but autoerotica asphyxiation, where they say, oh, maybe we should get some ropes, hang ourselves so we can die, and then have an erection, and then ejaculate, and then that'll become a mandrake, which is like lore that used to exist when they would hang people. And it's like, okay, great, I needed to know that for this play. So it's kind of already it's interesting. That's one of their thoughts right before they bring up that they're waiting for Godot. It's kind of like they should just kill themselves for the sake of pleasure. And so that does very much resonate the ideas of hedonism, of self-destruction in a godless world. It does make sense, and it is evoking that feeling, that idea, that mindset that I think prevailed in Europe in the post-war period. And it seems very much that the entire landscape that they inhabit seems to be like a bombed out landscape from World War One. World War II, there was much more, it was Blitzkrieg, right? So the trenches were gone. But World War One was a lot more dismal in the sense that the countryside was, I wouldn't say destroyed, but evaporated. There are scenes and pictures from certain hills and meadows in France that have been reduced to what some consider to be the equivalent of the surface of the moon. Like the artillery that just kept pounding those certain areas just turned into these kind of mounds, like a ski hill where it's all moguls. And the complete destruction of nature and such a wide and vast array over those 4 years where all those artillery shells were shot into the countryside, it looks alien. And similarly, the background for Estragon and Vladimir's setting is also very alien, where essentially it says there's nothing really there. Estragon, in keeping with the tone of miscommunication, he's not sure if it's night or day, or if day is coming or night is coming, or if it's Saturday or Sunday or even Thursday. So he's just completely confuddled, confused, lost. And the only thing that's there is a tree. And so they say in the beginning with Godot that they said that Godot was going to meet them by a tree. And something that's actually a pretty interesting imagery in here. So there is, a lot of Christian imagery that they do bring up. They do mention Christ, where Estragon says, oh, I've tried to compare myself to Christ all the time, which is really funny because now I just remembered in the opening act, Vladimir is telling him the story about the two thieves on either side of Christ and which one he saved. And Estragon makes the claim, oh, I have no idea who the Savior is. But later he mentions that Christ is his role model. So already there's a contradiction there, which I think probably is intentional. So this is just a bunch of intentional contradictions value misalignments, etc., and just trying to evoke the tone of the age, the zeitgeist again. And so it's funny actually, because in that opening scene, I actually really like it because Vladimir is the kind of, it's not a part of his character, but he has a very stereotypical kind of atheist argument where he's saying, well, in the gospel, it says that, one of the thieves was saved. And he says, well, those are pretty good chances compared to us, because the illusion is that they're two guys who are being crucified together, or they're waiting for God to save one of them. And so he's trying to make this argument about the mathematical chances, but he takes the gospel story and he turns it into like a mathematical formulation, kind of like Pascal, but a lot more personal and emotional and objectified. And so it goes on saying, well, you know what, maybe those chances of 50-50 aren't even that good, because there were the other gospel storytellers, Mark, Luke, and John, who didn't even mention the two thieves on the cross. I'm actually not sure how accurate this is. I haven't compared these stories in the Bible myself, but he's basically saying, well, if it's not a 50-50 chance, maybe it's a 1/8 chance, because only one of them talks about it, even though that's the story everyone talks about and that's the one they accept. And it's like, well, because it wasn't. So it's this hyper rational, on the face reading of the biblical text without any room left for metaphor or interpretation. It's a mathematical, reasonable, logical deconstruction of a biblical story, which again just is perfect for the tone of this book and what it's trying to convey. It's everything has become hyper rational, hyper logical, and yet at the same time, by getting rid of religion and getting rid of spirituality, the world that they inhabit makes absolutely no sense. They're waiting for God, they're waiting for salvation essentially from a God that does not seem to appear or show up. Another thing that, again, I think maybe links this to Dadaism in itself. Again, Dadaism, the word itself, is like a reduction of meaning and a reduction of the words of other things. I think it was actually doesn't mean Dada as in father. I think it's after a certain person. I haven't checked that, but I'll check it right now. Okay. There is no consensus on the origin of the movement's name. A common story is that artist Richard Hullensbeck slid a paper knife randomly into a dictionary and it landed on Dada, a French term for a hobby horse. But I kind of love that Dadaism literally means nothing. It's literally a non sequitur. Wow, okay, I wasn't expecting that. But yeah, similar to even the way it sounds. The point I'm trying to get to is that in the book, Vladimir and Estragon rarely call each other by name. They use these weird abridged versions of their names. So Estragon is called Gogo, and Vladimir is called Didi. So they take like the one syllable in their name and they just repeat it again, and that's how they refer to each other. Again, it's this abbreviation of thought, abbreviation of nature, of development. I mean, you think about TikTok attention spans today, this is kind of what they thought was the issue. And I think maybe this was derived from, again, the chaos and insanity of the world wars, the shell-shock troops that came home and, even though they were physically fine, their minds were completely destroyed. Again, just a lot of the loss of meaning, the reduction of meaning, the reduction of words coinciding with that, and how, again, the conversations in this book, are just very similar to random, circular logic. And again, the circular logic is whenever they say, let's go or let's do something, they never do anything because they can't. Because again, they're waiting for Godot, they're waiting for God or a reason. And so really it's the loss of reason, the loss of development, the loss of intellect in the post-war period, and how they're waiting for God to come back. And there's all these reasons why he's not coming back, or he's coming back tomorrow. For example, there is a boy who apparently works for Mr. Godot, who shows up in the first act, I believe, and says, oh, Mr. Godot says he couldn't make it today, he will come tomorrow. And then in the second act, the boy comes back and says the exact same thing, that he's coming tomorrow. So I don't know if he's a metaphor for a priest or one of the prophets, or these, the people who always promise God and salvation are coming, but not yet. And so this just continues to, confuse and aggravate Vladimir and Estragon. And Vladimir tells the boy what he should tell Godot. And he says, well, I'm not sure what you should tell him, but tell him that you saw us, that you did see us, and that we are here and we are waiting. And that's pretty much, again, the same thing he tells him on the second day as well. But let me just read a bit of this. Let's go. We can't. Why not? We're waiting for Godot. Ah. You're sure it was here? What? That we were to wait. He said by the tree. Do you see any others? What is it? I don't know. A willow. Where are the leaves? It must be dead. No more weeping. Or perhaps it's not the season. Let's look to me more like a bush. A shrub. A bush. Ah, what are you insinuating? That we've come to the wrong place? He should be here. He didn't say for sure he'd come. And if he doesn't come, will we come back tomorrow? And then the day after tomorrow? Possibly. And so on. The point is, until he comes, you're merciless. We came here yesterday. Ah, no, then you're mistaken. What did we do yesterday? What did we do yesterday? Yes. Why, nothing is certain when you're about. In my opinion, we were here. Anyway, this is the dialogue. It's absolutely kind of atrocious to get through. It's very difficult. Again, it's all of this effort and work is just to extract really an emotion or an idea of the loss of ideas, really. And it's funny about the tree, because I really like the tree, because I feel like there was kind of a argument or a way that if you were to turn this into a sensical, logical, reasonable story or something, what's really interesting in the second act, in the first act the tree is completely dead, but in the second act the tree is filled with leaves, and even Estragon points this out, and he says, well, yesterday that tree was dead. And so then again that plays into the idea of the dilation of time, that they either don't know how long they've been there, and a day is actually a month or a year or something, or maybe there was a miracle that happened right in front of them, that the tree came alive, or God is residing in the tree, or everything they ever needed was inside themselves, something cheesy like that. But in any case, the presence of that is really interesting to me, and the tree symbology and the newness of life and their inability to really recognize or appreciate it is again really interesting. I think it's time that I did talk about the last two characters in this play, which are Pozo and Lucky. And Pozo, I can't remember exactly, but just from the name itself, I imagine like a clown-like character. I don't know if that's intentional. I don't think they do that in the play, but that's what comes to mind. And they also, when they first meet him, Pozo is riding Lucky, who is another man, I guess, who is like on a rope and a leash, and Pozo is this hyper abusive character who kind of spends time with Aragon and Vladimir, and Lucky's basically mute, unintelligent, and so on. And what happens is Pozo, when he first shows up, Vladimir and Estragon think, oh, that's Godot, he's finally come. And Pozo has to talk them and says, no, my name is Pozo. And they say, Bozo? No. Slozo? No. It's a little bit funny sometimes, but Pozo basically talks them out of it, that he's not the guy they've been waiting for. And he asks them, well, why are you waiting here? And they kind of say, oh, we don't know, we're waiting for Godot, and we can't do anything until he arrives. And Pozo's like, oh, well, that's rather terrible, isn't it? And so he really abuses Lucky, and I guess the irony of Lucky's name is that he is very unlucky. I'm not exactly sure what Pozo is supposed to represent or who he's supposed to represent. Again, this whole thing feels very contemporary to me, and even on some things I'm just reaching for themes and I'm not really confident or certain that I'm true. But this is definitely one character where I really have no idea. This guy is just an asshole. There's no I'm sure there's an official interpretation, but I don't look those up so I can give my own more genuine interpretation for these things, right? But Lucky's interesting because for the most part he's just abused. He's just this guy who gets trampled on. They show up later in the second act where they come back again to do the same routine, except this time Vladimir abuses Lucky in his stead. It's actually interesting in the second act. What was it? It was Estragon comes up with the idea that they should play Pozo and Lucky, and at this point they're alone. And I don't know. I guess it's maybe a commentary on the fact that the emergence of cinema, because basically they're waiting for Godot. They have nothing to do, so we need to find a way to pass the time. He says, well, why don't we emulate the actions of those other people we saw? Even though they were violent and bad, we have nothing better to do. And so they pretend to abuse each other. And it's really funny that in the midst of this little role play, the real Pozo and the real Lucky show up. But this time Pozo is blind and he's yelling, "Help me, help me." And it's funny again because they go through the same routine where he says, "Oh, is that Godot? Has he finally arrived?" And they're like, "Oh no." And then Pozo has to talk to them even longer this time, it feels, to tell them, "No, I'm not Godot. I'm the guy Pozo." And they try to say, "Oh, were you here yesterday?" And he says, "I have no recollection of yesterday." So even Pozo can't tell time. And he admits somewhere saying that even tomorrow I shall not remember today. So again, I don't know if Pozo's supposed to represent the government or the church or a personal acquaintance of Mr. Beckett or an analogy for something. I have no idea, but that's who he is. I thought maybe he might be the Pope or something, or he's a blind leader or something, because what's interesting about Lucky is that in Act 1, which I was getting to, is that Pozo says don't put on Lucky's hat because it makes him think. And what happens when Lucky puts on the hat, it's not strictly, how do I say? It's not strictly Christian or religious commentary, but he starts, Lucky, who has been mute and deaf and dumb this whole time, starts talking in a broken, a full page of dialogue of semi-broken ideas where he's regurgitating certain phrases and referencing certain literary characters, but then also having bad grammar and then extending the R's on a name or something. And it's kind of this flow of information that maybe Samuel was exposed to at the time, that so-and-so in the paper said this, or Mr. whatever his face said that, and this ideology is doing this and these people that. And so it's just a whirlwind of information, commentary, and news that's kind of been put in a blender and just stirred up. I mean, I'll probably date this video, but something, it would be to reference people no, I'm not going to do it actually. I don't want to bring up certain names of e-celebrities and politicians and just say and the hyperinflation of this commodity has done this, and then so and so YouTuber said that, and so on. And maybe I can find it actually. Oh, I opened up to the exact right page I need to go to. So here's Lucky on his enlightened rant once he gets his thinking hat on, literally. Given the existence as uttered forth in the public works of Puncher and Watman, of a personal God, with white beard, outside time without extension, who from the heights of divine apathia divine, athambia divine, aphasia lovers us dearly, with some exceptions for reasons unknown, but still will tell and suffers like the divine. Miranda with those who, for reasons unknown, but time will tell, are plunged in torment, plunged in fire, whose fire flames is that continues, and who can doubt it will fire the firmament that is so say Blast hell to heaven, so blue, still, and calm, so calm with a calm, which even though intermittent is better than nothing, but not so fast, and considering what is more than the result of the labors left unfinished, crowned by the Academy of Anthropopotamy, Potometry of Essie and Posse of Testu and Cunard is established beyond all doubt, and it just, like, there it is. Like, it goes on for, like, the whole page. There's not one piece of exclamation or comma. It is a whole... Actually, hold on. Oh my god, this is two and a quarter pages of run-on sentences from Lucky until they finally hit the hat off his head and he goes back to being a dumb person. So there we have like a compilation of essays and lectures and theologians and, again, all this kind of thing, all the kind of things that I guess Samuel was surrounded by in his time, and was just so tired of hearing the same style of logic and diatribe that he just said, well, you know, this character is actually an idiot and is just regurgitating what he's been told and doesn't actually understand, and it's just a fury of noise and illusion and meaninglessness. There's also there are some funny scenes where, like, Pozo says, well, gentlemen, you have been civil to me. And Estragon and Vladimir are revulsed, like, not at all, no, don't worry about it. And he says, no, I really mean it. I want to pay you 10 francs. And they're like, no, please don't. And it's funny because later when he comes back, when he's blind, he asks them to help him. And, I forget what it was, but when Pozo shows up again, and he's blind and he's screaming, help me, Vladimir begins this paragraph with saying, let us not waste our time with idle chit-chat and ideologuing, and then proceeds to ideologue and idle chit-chat for the next paragraph while Pozo is grasping at them in pain and in fear of being blind. That was actually pretty funny, the self-arrogance and the irony of the characters. And then I think also in that passage, Pozo offers them, I'll give you francs, I'll give you money, please help me. And Estragon, or Vladimir doesn't even listen to him. Is like, oh no, that won't be necessary. So I'll give you 100 francs. And he's like, that's too little. I'll give you 200 francs. And he's like, can't do anything till Godot comes. And also I'm not interested. But yeah, so these are the weird scenes and you know, episodes that are playing out. And I think if we were to wrap this up, I'll just kind of go near the end. There is a somewhat interesting, insightful passage that Vladimir gives at the end here, or near the end. Was I sleeping while the others suffered? Am I sleeping now? Tomorrow when I wake, or think I do, what shall I say of today? That with Estragon, one of the few times he mentions him by his full name, by the way, my friend, at this place, until the fall of night, I waited for Godot, that Pozo passed with his carrier, and that he spoke to us? Probably. But in all that, what truth will there be? Interesting. So again, it's all these, so he can recount everything that happened, and he's saying, what is the truth in all of it? What is the purpose for all of it? And again, where is Godot? Where is purpose? Where is truth? And so God encompasses the rationality, and, well, not the rationality, but the purpose that's missing from this universe. Oh, this is interesting. Also, Vladimir, when the boy comes back, he asks, what does Mr. Godot do? And the boy is silent, and he says, well, and the boy says, he does nothing, sir. And he's just like, oh, okay, right, yes, of course, I knew that, very good. And then finally, near the end of the play, they finally bring up the idea of hanging themselves again. And so kind of the last passages in the play, Estragon says, if we parted, that might be better for us. Vladimir, we'll hang ourselves tomorrow, unless Godot comes. And if he comes, we'll be saved. And then you're like, well, shall we go? And, Vladimir has, Estragon has his pants on the ground or his trousers on the ground. And he keeps telling him, pull up your trousers, and he pulls them up. And Vladimir says, very well. Now, shall we go? And Estragon says, yes, let's go. And they do not move. The end. That's it. So that is Waiting for Godot. It's a little bit silly, a little bit entertaining, mostly artistic in a way that, this is, I would say, a true postmodernist production. And again, I have no interest or very little interest in postmodern thought or philosophy because it's just deconstruction of value. So yeah, postmodernist work really just a deconstruction of value and belief into smaller components. But it has no attempt to rebuild that belief or that purpose and, analyze why it made it like that. It's always kind of driven by a negative idea of a crypto-destructive, tendency that we're just going to dismantle this thing and kind of understand it, but not care if we do or don't understand it. And so it's just a deconstruction of meaning. And that's fine as an intellectual pursuit to say that and be like, oh, okay, cool, I get it, I guess. But, and everyone has those phases in their life where they're going to go through that. But in terms of a day-to-day, this is not a reading assignment. This is a book review channel where it's like, what do you want to read? What actually gives you meaning and purpose and value and, it cites the adventure of life. And this is not it. This is a commentary on what the opposite of that is. And it's very short, very brief. And so you kind of get the idea, get the vibe. I mean, it is a play. So it is meant to be, I would say, more emotional in a way instead of intellectual for the audience, because it's expected to be in front of an audience. And again, I mean, unlike other plays, like I know for my Macbeth thing, I said Shakespeare, you really need to see it because the language they use, you have no idea what the emphasis is because it's just, it's hundreds of years old. It's not contemporary at all. This one, I think you can actually read. That being said, though, it does help to actually just watch the play on YouTube or something because it's just very, very direct. It's logical. It makes more sense when the characters say certain words in certain tones. The only benefit you might get from reading this is that you might have in your head a more interesting depiction of what these characters look like. Like I thought Posa was a clown. I'm sure if I go to the YouTube documentary right now or the YouTube production, it's not going to be that at all. So in that sense, there was some advantage to reading it rather than watching it. And again, a lot of the dialogue is, when they go on those run-on sentences, like you kind of just skip through and scan it. But a lot of the dialogue is written where it's just very one-word answers sometimes. And so it is very easy actually to just go through it and read it as such. The last thing I will say about this piece of work is that I have not, references, inspirations. I once saw this referenced in a place that completely blew my mind and was completely offside and I had no idea what to say. But this book is referenced in the 4th or 5th episode of .hack/sign, where essentially Sukasa's gone missing and Bear and Mimiru are sitting on the, this bench or something overlooking the plains. And Bear, I think, mentions the aspect or the idea that we're waiting for Godot. And the idea of waiting for Godot in a VR landscape is so much more interesting because you are in a truly fake environment where God truly can't really enter it unless it's within yourself. I don't know. Being in a virtual environment is much more interesting to the artificial nature of reality, that you feel essentially inherently disconnected from nature and God because you are in a virtual reality. You are in a not real world. So of course you feel odd and weird and something isn't right here, but I'm not sure what it is kind of feeling. And yeah, I was shocked and weirdly surprised and happy that this showed up there. And I remember that scene. It was probably more than a decade ago, but it was like, whoa, okay, they just they just dropped that. And I guess on that point, Dot Hack's Last Line is one of my favorite animes of all time. It's not good, but it is one of my favorites, and it's maybe something I'll talk about in the future. Maybe I'll do a review of it, but Dot Hack Slash Line has a very special place in my heart. It's about, I know, the fragility of the main character, hope, fear, the different shades of reality, how someone can retreat into the internet and have a different persona. Some really interesting, heavy themes. And I feel just Tsukasa in general is a really interesting character who is, in a ways, very weak, almost effeminate, but when he finally gets his little superpower, he becomes almost this sadistic kind of person who wants to take revenge on the world, but at the same time realizes what he's doing and he regrets it. I don't know, Dot Hack is a completely different kettle of fish, and I literally don't care about the manga or the original games or the new games, the GU universe. The anime, though, I am just 100% like, that is my absolute jam. Anyway, I will talk about that at another time. This is about this play, which basically I have finished reviewing here. So yeah, Waiting for Godot, that's what it is. Hopefully, I don't know, this might help someone with the book report. I have no idea. But yeah, anyway guys, that's it. And as always, keep reading.